Picture this. You're sitting across from a potential client who's about to make the biggest financial decision of their life, buying their dream home. The stakes are high, the competition is fierce, and one wrong move could cost you $1 million deal. Now imagine that you're 28 years old, you have Down syndrome, and every real estate expert in the city has already written you off as someone who could never succeed in this cutthroat business. This is the reality that Danny Rodriguez faced every single day, and somehow impossibly, he didn't just survive in the brutal world of luxury real estate, he became the undisputed king of it, building a multi-million-dollar empire that left seasoned professionals speechless. But how? How does someone that society says can't handle complex decisions end up orchestrating deals worth tens of millions of dollars? How does a person with an intellectual disability become the most trusted name in high-end real estate? The answer lies in something that no business school teaches, and no amount of experience can replicate: the extraordinary power of authentic human connection. Danny's story doesn't start in a boardroom or a luxury penthouse. It begins in a small apartment in Queens, New York, where a 5-year-old boy with Down syndrome was doing something that amazed everyone around him. He was making friends with every single person in his neighborhood. While other children played with toys, Danny was knocking on doors, introducing himself to elderly Mrs. Chen in 3B, helping teenage Marcus carry groceries up 4 flights of stairs, and somehow remembering every detail about every person's life. He knew when Mr. Peterson's arthritis was acting up, when the Johnsons were worried about their mortgage payment, and when young Sarah from the 2nd floor had gotten accepted to college. Danny had this gift, recalls his mother, Maria Rodriguez. He could walk into a room full of strangers, and within 10 minutes, everyone would be laughing, sharing their life stories, and treating him like family. It wasn't something we taught him, it was just who he was. What Maria didn't realize was that she was watching the development of what would become Danny's greatest business asset, an almost supernatural ability to understand what people really wanted, not just what they said they wanted. By age 10, Danny had become the unofficial community ambassador of their apartment building. When new tenants moved in, landlord Tony Castellano would literally send Danny to introduce them to the building. When apartments became available, people would ask Danny, not the landlord, about what it was like to live there. The kid was better than any real estate agent, Tony remembers. People trusted him completely. If Danny said an apartment was good, they'd sign the lease on the spot. If he seemed hesitant, they'd keep looking. I started joking that I should put him on payroll. That joke would turn out to be more prophetic than anyone imagined. Danny's unique talents became even more apparent during his teenage years. While his classmates struggled with the social complexities of high school, Danny effortlessly navigated relationships with students, teachers, and staff. More importantly, he had developed an almost mystical ability to sense what people needed, often before they knew it themselves. But Danny's abilities went far beyond simple social skills. Teachers began noticing that he had an extraordinary memory for personal details that seemed irrelevant to others, but proved crucial for understanding human behavior. He remembered that Mrs. Patterson's daughter was applying to college, that janitor Mike was worried about his car repairs, that the new transfer student Jessica was struggling to make friends because her family had moved 6 times in 4 years. Danny would walk into a room and within minutes he'd have assessed the emotional state of everyone present, recalls his high school counselor, Dr. Lisa Park. But more than that, he seemed to instinctively understand the underlying causes of people's stress, happiness, or uncertainty. It was like he could read the invisible connections between people and their circumstances. His special education teacher, Mrs. Thompson, noticed something remarkable during class projects. Other students would focus on completing assignments correctly, she explains. Danny would focus on understanding why the assignment mattered to each individual student. He could look at someone and somehow know exactly what would motivate them, what would worry them, what would make them feel confident. This intuitive understanding extended beyond school in ways that amazed his family. During family gatherings, relatives began asking Danny for advice about major life decisions. Should they take the new job? Was it the right time to move? Should they trust their contractor? His responses weren't based on complex analysis. They came from an instinctive understanding of people's true motivations and fears. More remarkably, Danny began demonstrating an uncanny ability to predict how people would react to major life changes. When his cousin Miguel was considering a job transfer to another state, most family members focused on salary, career prospects, and practical considerations. Danny asked different questions. Will Maria be happy there? Does Miguel like meeting new people or does he prefer familiar places? How will they feel about starting over? 6 months later, when Miguel's family returned from their unsuccessful relocation, everyone realized that Danny had identified the exact issues that had made the move problematic, issues that seemed insignificant at the time, but proved crucial to the family's happiness and success. These experiences taught Danny's family that his perspective on human behavior wasn't just different, it was often more accurate than conventional wisdom. While others analyzed situations logically, Danny understood them emotionally and intuitively in ways that consistently proved prophetic. Danny would ask questions that no one else thought to ask, recalls his uncle Roberto, not "what's the salary," but "how will this job make you feel when you wake up in the morning?" Not "is the house big enough," but "can you imagine being happy there for 10 years?" He saw things the rest of us missed. The turning point came when Danny was 17, and the Rodriguez family faced a crisis that would change everything. Maria had been laid off from her job at the hospital, and they were struggling to keep up with rent payments. The family was facing eviction, and traditional solutions, bank loans, family assistance, government programs, weren't working. That's when Danny made a suggestion that seemed impossible. What if we bought our own building instead of renting? The idea was absurd. The family had no savings, no credit, and no experience in real estate investment. But Danny had been quietly observing something that the adults had missed. Their neighborhood was changing, young professionals were moving in, property values were slowly rising, and several buildings were sitting empty because landlords couldn't find reliable tenants. Danny had also noticed something else. He knew everyone in the neighborhood and people trusted him. When he told Mrs. Chen that the Rodriguez family would be good tenants, she believed him. When he assured the teenage Marcus that living next door to the Rodriguez family would be safe and quiet, Marcus convinced his parents to sign a lease. Acting on pure instinct, Danny convinced his mother to let him arrange a meeting with the owner of their building, Mr. Castellano. The building was a small 6-unit property that Castellano was considering selling because managing tenants had become too stressful and time-consuming. What happened in that meeting became legendary in their neighborhood and would eventually be studied by business schools as an example of unconventional negotiation brilliance. Danny didn't present financial projections or market analyses. Instead, he did something that no real estate investor had ever done before. He introduced Mr. Castellano to every single tenant in the building, personally vouching for their character, sharing details about their families, their jobs, their dreams, and their challenges. But Danny's presentation went deeper than simple introductions. He had spent months observing and understanding the subtle dynamics that made their building work as a community. He explained to Castellano how Mrs. Chen always checked on elderly Mr. Petrov when she came home from her night shifts, how teenage Marcus had voluntarily started shoveling snow from the sidewalk because he knew the elderly residents struggled with winter weather, how the young couple in 2B had organized informal babysitting exchanges with other families, creating a support network that made everyone feel safer and more connected. "This is Mrs. Chen," Danny explained. "She's lived here 12 years and never missed a rent payment. She worries about noise because she works night shifts at the hospital, but she loves this building because the neighbors are respectful. If you sell to someone who doesn't care about the community, she'll have to move, and she can't afford anywhere else nice." Danny continued through each tenant, but his descriptions weren't just personal, they were strategic. He demonstrated how each person contributed to the building's stability and success. Mrs. Chen's medical knowledge had helped during minor emergencies. Marcus's street smarts had prevented break-in attempts. The couple in 2B had connections to reliable, affordable service providers for building maintenance. Danny painted a picture of the building as a living ecosystem. Castellano later explained to other property owners, "He showed me that what I thought were just rental units were actually interdependent relationships that created value beyond what rent money could buy. Stability, security, community reputation, all things that protected my investment in ways I'd never considered." For 2 hours, Danny painted a picture of the building not as a financial investment, but as a community of real people with real lives. He explained how the current tenants looked out for each other, how they maintained the common areas, how they had created an environment where everyone felt safe and valued. Most remarkably, Danny had prepared detailed scenarios showing what could happen under different ownership arrangements. If the building was sold to developers who raised rents significantly, the displacement wouldn't just affect individual tenants, it would destroy the community relationships that made the building special. New tenants would lack the established connections and mutual trust that had eliminated most security and maintenance problems. Then Danny made his pitch. "What if my family managed the building for you? You wouldn't have to worry about collecting rent, handling repairs, or finding new tenants. We'll take care of everything, and you'll get your money every month without any stress." The proposal was unprecedented. The Rodriguez family had no property management experience, no business license, no formal qualifications. But Castellano found himself agreeing to try it for 6 months, not because the offer made financial sense, but because Danny had demonstrated an understanding of property value that went far beyond traditional real estate thinking. What happened next defied every expectation anyone had about property management, especially property management handled by someone with an intellectual disability. Danny approached building management the same way he approached everything else, by understanding what each person really needed. Instead of treating tenants as sources of monthly payments, he treated them as individuals whose happiness directly affected the success of the entire community. When the heating system broke in the middle of winter, most property managers would have called the cheapest repair service and told tenants to be patient. Danny did something different. He personally went door to door, apologizing to each tenant, explaining exactly what was being done to fix the problem, and providing space heaters at no charge while repairs were completed. But Danny's approach went far beyond basic customer service. He had noticed that heating problems always seemed to affect some units more severely than others, causing tension between tenants who were comfortable and those who were suffering. So he implemented what he called community temperature management, redistributing temporary heating resources based on individual needs, rather than apartment size or rent payments. Elderly Mrs. Chen, who had circulation problems, got priority heating support. The family with young children received extra blankets and portable heaters. The college students who were home less frequently were asked if they could temporarily relocate to the building's common room, which had been converted into a warm community space with hot beverages and entertainment. Most property managers see a heating breakdown as a building problem, explains tenant Robert Martinez. Danny saw it as a community challenge that we could solve together. Instead of everyone being miserable individually, we ended up having what felt like an extended family gathering. Kids were playing games, adults were sharing stories, elderly residents were giving advice to young people. The heating got fixed, but we kept having community gatherings even after everything was working normally. When Mrs. Chen mentioned that she felt unsafe walking to her car at night, Danny didn't just increase lighting, he organized a neighborhood watch system and personally walked elderly tenants to their cars when needed. Again, Danny's solution addressed multiple issues simultaneously. The safety escort system created opportunities for residents to get to know each other better. Younger tenants took pride in helping elderly neighbors, while older residents shared stories and advice that strengthened community bonds. The increased foot traffic and visible community presence naturally deterred criminal activity without requiring expensive security measures. Danny turned a security problem into a community-building opportunity, recalls Marcus Johnson, who participated in the escort program as a teenager. Walking Mrs. Chen to her car became the highlight of my day. She would tell me stories about the neighborhood's history, give me advice about school and relationships, and make me feel like I was an important part of something bigger than just paying rent. When young couple in 4A were expecting their first baby, Danny didn't wait for them to request modifications. He proactively had the apartment baby-proofed and arranged for a neighbor to help with grocery shopping during the final weeks of pregnancy. But Danny's prenatal support system became a model for how communities could support major life transitions. He organized a building-wide baby shower, where every tenant contributed something, not just gifts, but ongoing support commitments. Mrs. Chen offered to provide medical advice and emergency childcare. The teenage residents volunteered for grocery runs and package deliveries. Other parents shared equipment advice and babysitting exchanges. By the time our daughter was born, we had a support network that most people never get from their extended families, explains new mother Jessica Wang. Danny had helped create a community where having a baby wasn't just a personal challenge, it was a neighborhood celebration that everyone contributed to and benefited from. The results were extraordinary. In 6 months, the building went from having constant turnover and maintenance issues to having a waiting list of prospective tenants. More importantly, current tenants were not only staying but actively referring friends and family members. Word spread throughout the neighborhood about the building with the amazing property manager who actually cared about his tenants. Other building owners began asking Castellano how he had achieved 100% occupancy with 0 tenant complaints. That's when Danny made his next impossible suggestion: what if we bought the building ourselves? The idea seemed even more absurd than the first one. The Rodriguez family had no money for a down payment, no established credit history, and no traditional qualifications for a commercial real estate loan. But Danny had been quietly building something more valuable than any of those things: relationships and reputation. He had proven that he could maintain full occupancy, keep tenants happy, and generate consistent rental income. More importantly, he had demonstrated an almost supernatural ability to assess potential tenants' reliability and compatibility with the existing community. Banks don't typically make loans based on being really good with people, but Danny had unknowingly created something that financial institutions do value: predictable cash flow and proven property management success. With Castellano's endorsement and a detailed record of the building's improved financial performance under Danny's management, the Rodriguez family qualified for an owner-occupied commercial property loan. They bought their first building in 2015, when Danny was just 19 years old. Most people would have considered owning one successful rental property to be a remarkable achievement. Danny was just getting started. His approach to real estate investment was unlike anything the industry had ever seen. While other investors focused on market analysis, property values, and financial projections, Danny focused on something completely different: understanding what made neighborhoods work. He would spend weeks in an area before considering any investment, not studying comparable sales or zoning regulations, but talking to residents, business owners, and community leaders. He would visit local coffee shops, attend community meetings, and introduce himself to everyone from teenagers hanging out on street corners to elderly people walking their dogs. Danny could tell you more about a neighborhood in 2 weeks than most realtors learned in 2 years, says Patricia Williams, who became Danny's first official business partner in 2016. He didn't know about cap rates or debt-to-equity ratios, but he could tell you whether the community was stable, whether people were happy there, and whether the area was going to improve or decline. This unconventional approach led to investment decisions that looked crazy to traditional real estate professionals, but proved to be brilliantly successful. Danny would buy properties in neighborhoods that other investors avoided, not because the numbers looked bad but because the community dynamics were wrong. Conversely, he would purchase buildings in areas that other investors overlooked, not because they were obviously undervalued, but because Danny could see potential for community improvement that wasn't reflected in current market prices. His second property purchase perfectly illustrated this approach. In 2016, Danny bought a small apartment building in a neighborhood that was transitioning from industrial to residential use. Most investors saw an area with no established community, limited amenities, and uncertain future prospects. Danny saw something different. He saw young professionals who were being priced out of more expensive neighborhoods, small business owners looking for affordable commercial space, and families who wanted safe, affordable housing but had been overlooked by traditional property developers. Instead of simply buying the building and renting units, Danny did something unprecedented. He became the community developer for the entire neighborhood. He organized block parties to help new residents meet each other. He lobbied city council for better street lighting and safer crosswalks. He convinced local business owners to sponsor community events that brought people together and created a sense of neighborhood identity. Most remarkably, he personally interviewed every potential tenant, not to screen them out, but to help them understand how they could contribute to the community he was building. Danny didn't just rent apartments, explains tenant Jennifer Martinez, no relation. He was creating a neighborhood where people actually wanted to live, where everyone looked out for each other, where children could play safely and elderly residents felt valued. It was like living in a small town in the middle of the city. The waiting list for Danny's properties became so long that people would ask to be notified years in advance when units might become available. His tenant retention rate reached an almost impossible 98%, in an industry where 30% annual turnover is considered normal. But Danny's true genius became apparent when other property owners in the neighborhood began asking for his help. Buildings that had struggled with vacancies, maintenance issues, and problem tenants were seeing the success of Danny's community-focused approach and wanted to learn his methods. That's when Danny made his third impossible decision. He would expand from owning properties to managing properties for other owners, and eventually to developing entire neighborhood improvement strategies. By 2018, Danny Rodriguez Properties was managing over 40 rental units across 3 neighborhoods. But unlike traditional property management companies that focused on maximizing profits and minimizing costs, Danny's company focused on creating communities where people genuinely wanted to live. His management fees were higher than industry standards, but property owners were willing to pay them because Danny delivered something that no amount of traditional expertise could guarantee: happy tenants who stayed long-term, took care of their units, and actually improved the value of the properties they lived in. The business model was revolutionary. Instead of viewing tenants as necessary inconveniences who had to be managed and controlled, Danny treated them as community members whose satisfaction directly contributed to the success of everyone involved. He implemented policies that seemed counterproductive to traditional property management thinking, but proved to be brilliantly effective. Tenants could paint their apartments any color they wanted. They could make minor modifications to improve functionality. They were encouraged to use common areas for personal celebrations and community gatherings. Most remarkably, Danny established a tenant advisory committee for each building he managed. Residents had input on building policies, maintenance priorities, and even the selection of new tenants. This approach created a sense of ownership and pride that transformed the entire rental experience. Living in one of Danny's buildings was like being part of a chosen family, explains longtime tenant Robert Chen. Everyone looked out for each other, helped with problems, celebrated good news together. When I got promoted at work, my neighbors threw a party. When my father was in the hospital, they organized meal deliveries and pet care. Danny had created something special. The financial results spoke for themselves. Buildings under Danny's management commanded rental rates 15 to 20% above neighborhood averages, maintained occupancy rates above 95%, and had maintenance costs 30% below industry norms, because tenants actually took care of their homes. Word of Danny's success began attracting attention from real estate investors throughout New York. By 2019, he was managing properties worth over $50 million and had expanded his services to include acquisition consulting, community development planning, and tenant relations training for other property management companies. But Danny's most ambitious project was yet to come. In early 2020, just as the COVID-19 pandemic was beginning to devastate the real estate industry, Danny made a decision that seemed completely insane. He was going to develop an entire apartment complex from scratch, designed specifically around community building principles that he had been developing for 5 years. The project would cost $15 million, require coordination with dozens of contractors and city agencies, and compete with established developers who had decades of experience and unlimited financial resources. Danny had never developed new construction before. He didn't understand zoning laws, building codes, or construction management. He had no formal training in architecture, urban planning, or project finance. What he did have was something more valuable, a clear vision of what people really wanted in a place to call home, and 5 years of proven success in creating exactly those conditions. The Riverside Community, as Danny named his development, would be a 60-unit apartment complex designed not just for comfortable living, but for community connection. Every aspect of the building, from the layout of common areas to the selection of tenants, would be planned around creating the kind of neighborhood that Danny had been perfecting in his existing properties. The project faced immediate skepticism from city planners, financial institutions, and construction professionals. How could someone with Down syndrome manage a multi-million-dollar development project? How could he coordinate the complex legal, financial, and logistical requirements involved in new construction? The answer, once again, lay in Danny's greatest strength, his ability to find and motivate the right people to help him achieve his vision. Instead of trying to learn every aspect of development himself, Danny assembled a team of professionals who shared his commitment to community-focused housing. He found an architect who specialized in buildings that encouraged social interaction. He selected a general contractor whose employees lived in the neighborhoods where they worked. He partnered with a property management company that prioritized tenant satisfaction over profit margins. Most importantly, he involved future residents in the design process from the very beginning. Instead of building first and marketing later, Danny began accepting applications and deposits before construction even started. Prospective tenants had input on unit layouts, common area designs, and community policies. Danny was creating a community before the building even existed, explains architect Sarah Kim, who designed Riverside Community. By the time we broke ground, we already had a waiting list of people who felt like they were helping to create their future home, not just renting a place to live. The construction process itself became a community event. Danny organized monthly meetings where future residents could meet each other, see construction progress, and provide feedback on design decisions that were still changeable. Children drew pictures of what they hoped their new home would look like. Elderly residents shared stories about the best neighborhoods they had ever lived in. Young professionals discussed what amenities would help them feel connected to their neighbors. These community design sessions produced innovations that professional architects had never considered. Children requested reading nooks near windows where they could do homework while staying connected to family activities. Elderly residents suggested grab bars and non-slip surfaces that would help people age in place safely. Young professionals wanted flexible spaces that could serve as home offices during the day and entertainment areas in the evening. But the most valuable input came from understanding how different groups of residents could support each other. Elderly residents wanted to share their cooking and crafting skills but needed help with technology and physical tasks. Young professionals needed meal preparation and household management support but could offer tech help and transportation. Families with children needed babysitting and educational support but could provide community activities and neighborhood safety awareness. Danny incorporated these insights into the building design through what he called community interdependence architecture. Common areas were designed to facilitate natural interactions between different age groups. The community kitchen featured both high-tech appliances that young residents could teach others to use, and traditional cooking spaces where elderly residents could share family recipes and techniques. Workshop spaces included both computer workstations where professionals could offer tech support and traditional craft areas where experienced residents could teach woodworking, sewing, and repair skills. The community garden featured both ground-level plots for residents with mobility limitations and raised beds that children could safely tend. Danny didn't just design a building, explains architect Sarah Kim. He designed a system for people to help each other in ways that made everyone's life better. Residents weren't just neighbors, they became resources for each other in ways that created value far beyond what anyone could afford to purchase individually. The pre-construction community building also solved practical problems that typically plagued new developments. Because residents knew each other before moving in, there were no conflicts over noise, parking, or common area usage. Community policies had been developed collaboratively, so everyone understood and supported the building's social expectations. Most remarkably, the sense of shared investment created unprecedented construction cooperation. Future residents volunteered to help with landscaping, interior finishing work, and move-in coordination. The building was completed 2 months ahead of schedule and $200,000 under budget, savings that Danny passed along to residents through lower initial rents and upgraded amenities. When Riverside Community opened in September 2021, it represented more than just Danny's success as a real estate developer. It represented proof that his philosophy of community-centered housing could work on any scale. The building featured innovations that had never been seen in traditional apartment development: community gardens where residents could grow food together, shared workshops where tenants could borrow tools and work on projects, flexible common spaces that could be reconfigured for different activities, and even a community kitchen where residents could prepare large meals to share. But the most important innovation was invisible: a tenant selection and community management process that ensured residents were not just compatible with the building, but committed to the success of the community as a whole. The results exceeded even Danny's optimistic projections. Riverside Community achieved full occupancy before construction was completed, with a waiting list of over 200 prospective tenants. Rental rates were 25% above comparable new construction in the area, but residents considered them a bargain for the quality of life they were receiving. More significantly, the building became a model that other developers began studying and attempting to replicate. Danny started receiving consulting requests from real estate companies across the country who wanted to understand how he had achieved such extraordinary tenant satisfaction and financial success. By 2022, Danny Rodriguez Properties was valued at over $75 million, making Danny one of the youngest self-made millionaires in New York real estate. But for Danny, the financial success was secondary to something more important. He had proven that business success and community building were not just compatible, but mutually reinforcing. His approach began attracting attention from business schools, urban planning programs, and social policy researchers, who recognized that Danny had developed solutions to problems that traditional real estate development had never been able to solve: how to create affordable housing that people actually wanted to live in, how to build communities that were both economically sustainable and socially supportive, and how to make real estate investment a force for neighborhood improvement rather than displacement. Danny's influence extended far beyond his own properties. Other developers began adopting community-focused approaches to tenant selection and building management. City planners started requiring community input processes similar to Danny's methods. Property management companies began offering training programs based on his relationship-building techniques. The Danny Rodriguez Institute for Community-Centered Development, established in 2023, now provides training, consulting, and research services to real estate professionals who want to incorporate community building approaches into their own projects. But perhaps Danny's greatest achievement is the simplest one. He has created neighborhoods where people genuinely want to live, work, and raise their families. In an industry often criticized for prioritizing profits over people, Danny has proven that the most successful approach is often the most human one. Danny showed us that real estate isn't really about buildings, explains Dr. Maria Santos, who studies community development at Columbia University. It's about creating places where people can build the lives they want to live. His success comes from understanding that when you take care of people, they take care of everything else. Today, Danny continues expanding his real estate empire, but always with the same focus that has guided him from the beginning: understanding what people really need and creating environments where those needs can be met. His properties now span 5 neighborhoods in New York, with plans for expansion into other cities where his community-centered approach could make a difference. The waiting lists for Danny's properties now extend years into the future. Families plan their life changes around the possibility of eventually living in one of his communities. Young professionals relocate to New York specifically hoping to find housing in a Danny Rodriguez development. But Danny's vision extends beyond just real estate success. He's working with urban planners and policymakers to develop scalable approaches to community-centered housing that could be implemented in cities across the country. His methods are being studied as potential solutions to housing affordability crises, neighborhood gentrification issues, and urban social isolation problems. The boy who started by making friends with everyone in his apartment building has become a leader in reshaping how society thinks about housing, community, and what it means to be successful in business. People always ask me what my secret is, Danny explains in his characteristic straightforward way. But there's no secret. I just pay attention to what people need and try to help them get it. When people are happy where they live, everything else works better. His mother Maria Rodriguez reflects on watching her son build an empire that nobody thought was possible. When Danny was little, teachers would tell us to have realistic expectations about what he could achieve. They were right. We should have had realistic expectations. We should have expected him to change the world. The question that began this story was how someone with Down syndrome could become the king of luxury real estate. The answer, it turns out, was never about overcoming a disability. It was about recognizing and leveraging abilities that others had overlooked. Danny Rodriguez succeeded in real estate not despite having Down syndrome, but because of the qualities that came with it: an exceptional ability to connect with people authentically, an intuitive understanding of what makes communities work, and a genuine desire to see everyone around him succeed. In an industry built on competition, negotiation, and maximizing individual gain, Danny created success through cooperation, authenticity, and building shared prosperity. His empire wasn't built by beating the competition. It was built by making the competition irrelevant through offering something that no amount of traditional expertise could replicate. As Danny often tells young people who ask for business advice, don't try to be like everyone else. Figure out what makes you different, and then use that difference to help people in ways nobody else can. In the cutthroat world of New York real estate, that philosophy created a multi-million-dollar empire and proved that sometimes the most unconventional approach is the most successful one. Today, as Danny walks through neighborhoods where his buildings stand as monuments to community-centered development, he embodies a simple but revolutionary truth. Success isn't about being the smartest person in the room. It's about caring the most about the people in the room. His story continues to inspire real estate professionals, disability advocates, and anyone who has ever been told that their differences make them less capable of achieving their dreams. Danny Rodriguez didn't just build a real estate empire, he rebuilt the definition of what it means to be successful in business. The young man who was once told he would never be able to handle complex decisions now makes multi-million-dollar deals that reshape entire neighborhoods. The person who was supposed to need constant care now employs dozens of people and provides housing for hundreds of families. But most importantly, Danny Rodriguez proved that the qualities society often views as limitations, earnestness, emotional openness, and genuine concern for others' well-being, can actually be the foundation for extraordinary success when channeled with purpose and determination. His empire stands not just as a business achievement, but as proof that human potential comes in many forms, and sometimes the most powerful form is the one that nobody expects.